District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program.
Introducing the new Volvo XC90 with 7-seat versatility, Google built-in, and advanced safety features for all your precious cargo. The new Volvo XC90, designed for life. Visit volvocars.com/US to learn more.
On WhatsApp, no one can see or hear your personal messages. Whether it's a voice call, message, or sending a password. To WhatsApp, it's all just this. So whether you're sharing the streaming password in the family chat or trading those late-night voice messages that could basically become a podcast, your personal messages stay between you, your friends, and your family. No one else. Not even us. WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone.
Welcome to District of Conservation. I am your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. Richard, thank you so much for joining the podcast. We've had American Gas Association on before, or I've at least talked about what you guys do in terms of natural gas policy, but could you introduce yourself to the listeners and discuss your day-to-day job and your responsibilities with AGA, please?
Sure can, and glad to be here. Richard Meyer, I'm Vice President at the American Gas Association. I'm responsible for our energy markets, analysis, and codes and standards. What that means is we look at the market. We do market and policy analysis that supports our membership as well as the association's advocacy. And now, real quick, who are our members? AGA, we represent the investor-owned gas utilities. So these are the companies that pipe natural gas to homes and businesses in all 50 states.
You guys do fabulous work. I've worked a little bit with some of your colleagues on the policy side. I've spoken to some comms people. And natural gas, while it has been vilified, is something we widely consume and produce in this country. It's the largest electricity source when you're thinking in terms of electricity output. We also depend on natural gas with respect to household appliances. Your organization has done a lot defensively for the last few years, now more so on the offense since there's a more favorable climate regulatory-wise. So why is natural gas so important today, even though it's been long attacked and kind of disparaged by some people who support rather intermittent energy sources and really just don't have an understanding of what natural gas is about?
Well, one of my roles is just to look at the data and understand the role of U.S. natural gas in our energy economy here in the United States, and then the increasing role it plays in satisfying global energy demands. Today, natural gas is on the verge of becoming the number one energy source when we look at different fuels and energy consumption. It's been growing rapidly for really the last 2 decades, driven by technological change, improvements in extractive technologies, and it really that growth in U.S. shale gas is probably the most important energy story of our lifetime. When we look at how we use gas across the energy economy, it's natural gas is unique, where oil, even coal, even renewables tend to satisfy energy in just 1 or 2 parts of the economy. Natural gas serves all areas of the economy. So it heats our homes, heats our businesses. It powers our electric power sector, as you noted. We use it for industrial manufacturing and process heat. We use it in our vehicles, and increasingly we are beginning to export large volumes overseas. So when I look at the long-term picture, the role of gas has only increased in terms of its essential place in our energy economy. I know the politics around this can kind of ebb and flow, and the pendulum swings, but really we see a steady course here in terms of growth of production, growth in demand, and its importance in reducing our overall environmental footprint as well.
We've seen a lot of interesting data put out there about LNG exports, natural gas, and I point specifically to the LNG study at the end of the Biden administration that talked about it being more expensive to produce more LNG and to export it. And you can see that counteracted in the Trump administration response when they put their formal response to that fall 2024 study. But since your expertise is data and computing the numbers and crunching information out there, what is your kind of estimation or what's kind of a top view of natural gas in terms of the data, cost effective wise, emissions wise, in your purview? What should my listeners take away from that? Because we have seen some people try to distort what natural gas does using data. Of course, certain studies can be subjective depending upon, who's funding it and whatnot. But empirically, I've seen that natural gas tends to be favored and reap a lot of benefits even when you study it.
Yeah, well, let me unpack that. There's a few things there that you touched on. One is the question, how much natural gas do we have? And then there's the question of, well, what does it cost to produce that gas? And then 3, what are the impacts of using that gas, whether that's impacts to the economy or maybe effects on the environment, positive or negative potentially. So in terms of how much gas do we have, there are routine assessments that are done. The bottom line is right now we have a record future supply of gas. So that's the potential resources we could produce, as well as those kind of on-the-shelf inventories that are those reserves that haven't been produced but are likely to. So that's at a record level right now. How much can we? And so as a result of that, the likelihood that we could produce a lot more natural gas than we are today is fairly high. Most of the analytical community sees the potential for gas production growing substantially, not just in the next few years, but even in the coming decades, to satisfy growing domestic demand, again, for power, for our homes, for our businesses, for manufacturing, for AI and data centers. But also to greater production to satisfy this growing export market. What I see in the data is an abundance of supply that can satisfy a range of growing demands at a relatively affordable price. And we can look at other groups that have done this analysis. The federal government did a couple analyses, which, by the way, underpinned the LNG report that was released at the end of the last administration that you were talking about. Bottom line there is that they did a bunch of scenarios. They did a high export scenario, which is tripling exports from where they're at today, and the overall price impact was $1 per MMBTU at Henry Hub. Now, in percentage terms, that might be kind of high because you go from $3 to $4. That's that's a high percentage. But in terms of overall impacts on the commodity price, that, in my view, is relatively modest. And what it basically says is that we have the resource base to satisfy growing demand, but what we need in order to make that happen is the infrastructure that connects that production to consumption. So we have to have the pipelines. We've got to build more natural gas storage. We've got to enable the market to grow and to connect production to consumers. The last thing you noted is on the environmental front. There's been a lot of research that's dug into this. The bottom line here is any which way you look at it, as long as it says an advocacy-based math homework, it's very clear that natural gas has a clear role in reducing not only U.S. but global greenhouse gas emissions, and it has a far smaller environmental footprint compared to coal.
Could you speak to your recent nat gas storage study?
Yeah,
your findings.
What we see right now in the market is that, as I said, production is growing, consumption is growing. Let me put some numbers around that. Production from 2014 to 2023 grew on average on an annual basis about 5%. We're adding pipeline capacity, not as fast as we need to, but to the tune of new capacity around 4% per year. If you're building just new pipelines within single states, that's a little bit higher. But what we're not building is storage. We've increased the amount of underground natural gas storage in this country only 0.1% per year since 2014. So our ability to store gas is really lagging that consumption and really peak consumption of natural gas over time. So what we did is we dug into what's happening here, and we produced a report called "Assessing the Value of Natural Gas Storage." It's really meant as a primer on natural gas storage, both those underground facilities that store vast sums of energy, that we, moving natural gas across time and space so we can inject in the summer and pull it out in the winter when it's cold and we need it. But also storage above ground, so increasingly like LNG storage, which is a really important option for balancing the system for utilities. Even some electric generators are starting to put natural gas storage on site so that they have gas if there's any interruptions in the pipeline supply. So that's really important for electric reliability. So what we did is we evaluated all the different types of storage, looked at the economic case. Where is it valuable? What do you need to be thinking about? Who are the market participants and how they might value storage? For example, a utility, they really need storage for reliability. You have to have the gas there when people need it most. Others, they're looking to, let's say, play in the market, but that serves a very important role in helping stabilize prices, keep the variance or volatility of prices down. So there's different players that utilize these assets in different ways, and it creates an ecosystem that ultimately provides more reliability of energy consumers at a relatively lower and stable price. And the last thing I'll say is we did notice that we're not building as much storage as we have before. So what needs to be done? And so we really called on policymakers and others to take a real close look at what's happening in your backyard. And do you need more storage? And if so, how do we properly incentivize that for different kinds of consumers, whether that's your utility increasingly, or maybe that's increasingly for electric power generation or for LNG export, and then stepping back and saying, good, okay, now it's time to start building.
Storage will certainly be a question that people have, especially as we're seeing AI data centers. Of course, now I saw that study that said actually air conditioning is going to be consuming a lot of electricity, and I bet much of that will be fulfilled with natural gas, transportation, manufacturing, which kind of goes into, of course, you're very bullish about natural gas. Do you think anything, let's say like nuclear energy, could overpower or ideally supplement natural gas? That's what a lot of people are talking about. I know natural gas is more of your expertise, but we keep hearing, rightfully so, that more and more reliable energy needs to be shored up and produced and be widely consumed so you can meet this growing electricity demand. Or does this just mean that natural gas is going to be dominating for the next decade, 2 decades? What is kind of your view, crunching all the data? That can anything topple it, or is it going to be, dominant for the foreseeable future?
Well, as I said, natural gas is on track to become the number one energy source. We'll see when that happens. It's number 2 just by a little bit compared to oil right now in terms of total U.S. energy consumption. But AGA and I've always maintained that we need a diversity of resources. You have strength and resilience through diversity, and that includes in energy. And so we're going to see a range of different sources that are going to contribute in different ways in different parts of the country, since the resource mix varies depending on where you are. And some areas are very rich with some types of resources, but maybe don't have others, and so forth. Nuclear is a big part of that equation. The amount of nuclear generation we have has been largely flat for several decades. In fact, it's kind of declined over the past decade or so, and recent trends are trying to reverse that. That said, it's still hard to build a new plant, and most folks working on this expect more activity in terms of building new nuclear, but really not until the 2030s. But in the meantime, we have a reliability. We have reliability challenges emerging on our electric system. We have demand growth across our U.S. economy. We have a growing natural gas export market. And to satisfy these needs, these demands, natural gas is going to play a critical role. You use the word dominance. I just see a very outsized role, just given its versatility, given the economics of gas, given its wide availability, and given our extensive infrastructure resource base that can be leveraged to meet these needs. So, gas is a core part of the picture. It's not the whole picture, but it's going to be a very important part of our energy mix for decades to come.
Is there any other data that you can share with my listeners? Anything you haven't touched upon that would be germane to the conversation, you think?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to do is just illustrate how much natural gas serves in terms of our economy, and especially on those peak days when we really are consuming a lot of energy. On the coldest day of the year, let me back up. On January 21st of this year, we consumed more natural gas than ever before on a daily basis. This was during a significant cold event. And so we were using record levels of gas for the residential commercial sector. We were using a record amount of gas for a winter month for electric power generation. The industrial sector used a record amount of gas, and we were still exporting at the same time. So this just showcases how much we were using. But what I like to do is put this into perspective. In the residential commercial sector, we used just a little under 80 billion cubic feet on that single day. And what does that mean? Well, if you convert that to the electrical energy equivalent, that's basically like taking almost the entire U.S. electric grid and running it full bore for 24 hours. So if you took the whole electric grid, about 1,000 gigawatts, ran that for 24 hours, that's the amount of energy that was delivered via natural gas just to residential and commercial businesses on January 21st. So that's the size and the scale of what we're talking about. And really it illustrates not only the vital role of gas in meeting consumer needs on those coldest days, but the ability of the gas system to transport and store just vast amounts of energy to meet those seasonal and peak requirements. And really that's not a replaceable asset in the economy. No other source is really going to be able to meet or do what gas does today. And that's what I like to remind folks about.
Excellent. Where could people find your musings, your reports, any relevant data pertaining to AGA? Please dispense those links if you can.
Absolutely. You can find all of this on www.aga.org. And I'm also on Twitter putting a lot of these things out too.
Wonderful. Thank you, Richard, for crunching this in a very succinct manner. And if you ever have any follow-ups, please come back on again. Love to have you on.
It's a pleasure talking to you. Glad to be here and talk to you next time.
If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played. And also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day. And please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.